Hello everyone, this is The Lost Boy, and thanks for clicking on this video. I got to tell you, it'd be a whole lot cooler if you went ahead and clicked on them like and subscribe buttons. But then again, of course, that would be totally up to you. First off, I have to gush a bit about Splatoon 2. I know I'm late to the party, but I just picked it up and it really doesn't suck. Most of the time, when a game developer does something, like making a traditionally violent game with a non-violent theme, the result is contrived, artificial, and just not really very fun. Splatoon manages to integrate a non-violent theme, shooting paint, into an incredibly solid game mechanic, which connects your health and ammo resources, as well as making winning more about paint coverage than player kills. I just got it, so I'm still getting the hang of it, but between ARMS, Breath of the Wild, Odyssey, Mario Kart, and now this, a person really can't say much bad about the lineup for the Switch's first year. For the next item, news just broke that video game publisher WB Games has announced the removal of the entire microtransaction infrastructure from its game Middle-earth: Shadows of War, just over 6 months after release. If that news wasn't enough, the post announcing this development is just a joy to read. The following is an excerpt of the posting by community admin Monolith Mark on the WB Games website. The core promise of the Nemesis system is the ability to build relationships with your personal allies and enemies in a dynamic, open world. While purchasing orcs in the market is more immediate and provides additional player options, we have come to realize that providing this choice risked undermining the heart of our game, the Nemesis system. It allows you to miss out on the awesome player stories that you would have otherwise created, and it compromises those same stories even if you don't buy anything. Simply being aware that they are available for purchase reduces the immersion in the world and takes away from the challenge of building your personal army and your fortresses. In order to fully restore the core promise of the Nemesis system, we'll be permanently removing gold, war chests, and the market from Shadow of War. This means the option to purchase gold with real-world money and the ability to gain orc followers from war chests will be removed. The post goes on to explain that players will no longer be able to purchase in-game gold with real-world money as of May 8th, and will no longer be able to spend in-game gold as of July 17th, as well as confirming that these changes will be permanent and outlining some other changes regarding progression and the Shadow War portion of the game. This, at the same time, is a joyful moment and maddening as hell. The excerpt I quoted could nearly have been lifted verbatim from a Jim Sterling video, maybe after removing 30 or 40 curse words. And there's been no shortage of other commentators and game journalists voicing very similar opinions since the microtransaction trend started getting out of hand. The No, Pretty Good Gaming, Jimquisitions, and tons more. There was a time when you could hardly wave a mouse pointer around without hitting 5 YouTube videos about how pay-to-win microtransaction mechanics are not only ruining game balance, but actually damaging the quality of the gaming experience. This tasty little piece of news comes only a couple of weeks after an announcement for Star Wars Battlefront 2 that, although microtransactions will be returning, the entire progression system has been revamped and completely disconnected from in-game purchases. What this means is that all items purchasable by microtransactions will be cosmetic only. To the average person, this may not seem like a huge deal, but in context, this really seems like one of those rare David slays Goliath moments. Adding in the Shadow of War announcement, this now makes 2 huge publishers appearing to remove their boot from the neck of the average games consumer by completely walking back these new and predatory business practices. I have to say, it sure is hard for me to imagine that happening without a huge amount of pressure. I'm sure some of it has to do with Battlefront 2's sales taking a hit, but I heard Shadow of War actually sold pretty well, so it's not that, or at least not completely. Who knows how long this reprieve will last, but for now, I really have to give a hand to the games consumers who, in this case, made their voices heard in a very big way. I have been a gigantic fan of both Star Wars and the Tolkien novels since I was a child, but the pay-to-win mechanics in both games instantly turned me off from ever even touching them. Now, seemingly in a very short time, both have been restored to the quality piece of software that many were hoping for. In life, wins like this are pretty few and far between, which is why it's so important to make note of it and remember when it does happen, because it can help us have hope for the future. Score 1 for the good guys. Now, on to this week's main topic. Why consumers need simplified terms of service. A little over 2 weeks ago, the New York Times broke a story about Facebook and one of its partners called Cambridge Analytica, and how the partnership resulted in leaked data from approximately 50 million users and potentially many more. This scandal continued to unfold and worsen, with Facebook stock falling over $10 billion over the course of 1 week and a single-day loss of $4.9 billion. As a longtime member of the Facebook resistance, I can't say it's breaking my heart or that I found it very surprising. I'm not actually going to discuss the Facebook scandal any further. If you want to learn more about it, there is just oodles of coverage out there. However, it does serve as an excellent example of a concern that I've had for a long time. Sometime in the 90s, as we became familiar with such amazing new technologies as the personal computer and software and the internet, we necessarily became acquainted with new terms such as operating systems and drivers and terms of service. To be fair, terms of service was not an entirely new idea. Contract law has indeed existed for quite some time. What was new was how long, detailed, and technical these agreements had become. In the past, when presented with such a contract, it would likely have been with regards to the purchase of a house, perhaps a term of employment, or a sizable business transaction. These are important situations, and the agreements carry real weight, and most of us do not routinely make such agreements on a regular basis. Compare this to software or online terms of service agreements. The average person may agree to 3 to 5 of these per week, and pays about as much attention to the terms themselves as one might pay to a mosquito that needs swatting. I know that we're all completely conditioned to think this is normal now. I'm not claiming to be better or different from any of you. I certainly don't even glance at the terms anymore. No one who's not a lawyer would be able to make sense of such a barrage of legalese. No lawyer would even bother reading one unless someone else was paying them to. If you view the situation objectively, it's absolutely absurd. Agreements that are supposed to be binding in a court of law are specifically engineered to be too long and complicated for the average user to understand or read completely. It is an unreasonable and onerous burden to place on the consumer to require them to agree to terms that are beyond the understanding and capabilities of the average person. In my view, there is only one solution to this problem, and it's deceptively simple. I'm not suggesting that the legalese is entirely unnecessary. I'm sure the lawyers themselves must have some obscure reason for keeping it. What I am suggesting is that regular people shouldn't be required to read it. How would that work? Take all of the pertinent requirements, such as don't harass other users, or don't reverse engineer this video game, or your privacy settings are disabled at default, and translate them into terms real people can understand, like I just did. Obviously, a link to the full legalese version would be required, but the key thing is that the page you have to click agree on is only written in language usable by a layperson. Personally, I've long been aware of the privacy issues created by Facebook and companies like it, which is one of the reasons why I've resisted engaging with them. Many people who join Facebook have no idea, however, which is the biggest reason Facebook and companies like it should be required by law to provide simplified terms of service, which include important information such as privacy settings. This would help average users to avoid becoming embroiled in or contributing to situations like the Cambridge Analytica scandal. It would likely also help people like me feel more comfortable using a service like Facebook by making me feel like I'm actually able to see the lay of the land. Look at the result of ignoring this literal gobbledygook. Facebook users feeling angry and betrayed, company stock tanking, and potentially even causing damage to democracy itself. Sure, people need to get smarter and take responsibility, but we also have to demand to be given information that is clear and understandable when agreeing to legally binding documents and agreements. Please comment below with your ideas and opinions. Are you a fan of Splatoon? Are you happy to hear about the recent changes to Shadow of War and Battlefront 2? And what are your thoughts about long and complex end-user agreements? As always, thanks for watching. Always remember your happy thought, and I'll see you next time.